here's what we're going to be doing. I will say it out as we do it, but here's an overview. We will maintain the seed stitch pattern for the first 12 stitches. Then we'll purl 3, knit 6, purl 4, knit 6, purl 3, and seed stitch for 8 stitches. The reason I'm writing it seed stitch rather than knit 1, purl 1 and changing it every row is because you're maintaining the existing seed stitch pattern, which is already very visually obvious, and it is much, much easier to think of it that way, to continue with the pattern you've got rather than to say to yourself knit, purl, starting with a knit. You'll see what I'm saying as we go. As we have been doing, we will slip the first stitch, but it counts in the stitch count. So the first edge will be an outer edge of the blanket, left or right edge, when the blanket is finished. Slip 1. This one should be purled, and it's the second of the seed stitch stitches. Knit, purl, knit, purl. I do not have any yarn markers on here at the moment, but it would make sense to place some if you have trouble keeping up with it. Personally, I find the pattern makes itself obvious to me very shortly, and I'd just as soon not have anything else in the way. But many people feel differently, and that's perfectly all right. So we've done 6 of the seed stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, you could hang a marker on this peg if you want, so as to designate that all of these stitches from here to the edge are devoted to seed stitch from now till the end of the design. Next, purl 3. And you could mark these 3 in some way that to you means purl 3. These will be purl 3 every row. So again, to my mind, when I see this column of purls forming, that will be enough reminder for me. Now knit 6. Let me get this moved a little so you can see better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the knit 6 is where the cables will occur, but they will not occur every row. So you don't have nearly as many cable crossings as you might imagine to accomplish. And when you do, they're easy ones. Now we're to the center of the panel we're actually knitting right now, but not to the center of the blanket yet. Purl 4. If, for example, you're marking all the purl stitches with yarn or dangly markers of some kind, these are 4 to mark. Oops. There we go. Did you see my work pop in front of the pin? Wouldn't have caused any trouble right away, but a row or 2 along, I would have wished that I had not overlooked that. Time for another knit 6, which is another cable panel in the making, but on many rows it's just knitting. Around the corner we come. That was 2 of them, 3, 4, 5, 6. Purl 3, and now seed stitch the remaining 8. And yes, there are 8 left. Good going, us. And rather than worrying about counting, just look at the last stitch. That one was purled, that one was knitted. So I know it should be knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and as usual, this row should end with a purl, and that is how it's coming out, so everything is fine. Now this row has established the pattern for everything in the blanket while the cables are going on, and we won't change this basic arrangement until it's time to do the second edge, the top edge. The return row works just the way they have been, beginning with a slipped stitch. I slipped that, and that's the first seed stitch of the seed stitch panel, which is knits and purls alternating. Based on whatever was knitted last row, you knit the opposite thing this row. So what happens this row is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 more seed stitches. This should be a knit stitch. The seed stitch portions always are accomplished by knitting a purl into the previous knit and a knit into the previous purl. I've reached the other end, finishing row 2. That's row 2 of the cable panel repeat. And we go back the other way doing just what we've been doing. Begin and seed stitch. At this end, there is 12 seed stitches in the seed stitch panel. So there are the first 6 of them accomplished as soon as I knit over the knits. I can see that this should be a knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, completing the knits here. And you can see, I think, already starting what I've described to you. Pretty obviously all purl stitches there. And that should remind you that we have a purl 3 coming up, and there it is. Same thing in reverse. 6 knit stitches in a row, which should be a reminder. And for this row, row 3, it's still just 6 knit stitches. So we'll finish going all the way around row 3, maintaining the knits and purls as they are, except at the ends where the seed stitch pattern knits into knits and purls, no, knits into purls and purls into knits. Okay, we're on row 4 and I've already begun it because the beginning is just like all the others. Preserve this 8 stitch seed stitch panel at this edge, purl 3. Now we're still going to make 6 knit stitches, but we're going to cable. So we're going to knit the first 2, lift them up, both of them up, cross the right one to the peg that held the left one, replace it, stretch the left one over, and put it on the peg that held the right one. Now we'll do the very same thing with the next 2. Knit them both. You can use a pair of tools to do your crossing, or you can hold a stitch on a pin, cross the other stitch, always right over left for this row. Retrieve the original stitch and replace it on a peg. Same thing with the next pair. I do recommend that you do them 2 stitches at a time and complete the cable crosses. There are other ways to approach this, but this is the one that I think produces the best results and is also easiest. I'm using all different methods of crossing, though all the crosses will look and perform the same, so that you can get a feel for what's possible and find the one that works best for you. Now we're up to the purl 4, which we will do. That doesn't change. These stitches will be purled for the remainder of the project. The same thing is true for the columns of 3 purls together. They're creating background texture so that the cables really stand out. Next cable panel, exactly like the previous cable panel, but we'll do it together. 1, 2 stitches, regular knits, lift up the left one. If you wanted to use a second tool, you could prop it like that, letting the pins hold it out of the way. Then use your main tool to cross the right one. Then rescue the held one and pull it off like that. 2 more. Do not try to make these knit stitches overly tight. It's true that we want the cable to be dramatic, and it has to pull in a little bit to make the drama. But too tight is just hard on the loom and puckers the fabric, so there's no percentage in pulling it really, really snug. That's good enough. It will be a little bit stiffer to knit over next row after crossing it, but if you fear that you'll hurt your fingers or bend the pegs, that's overly tight, and you should work on your technique. I think when only crossing 2 stitches, my most common approach is what you're seeing, a combination of fingers and a tool. Now we are up to purl 3, which I will do. That's all the cable crossing for this row. And then we'll finish with the seed stitch panel as usual. begin again with the seed stitch panel, coming back the other direction, and just knit 6 next row. There won't be a cable cross, but the pattern is maintained with the seed stitch panel at the edge, purl 3, knit 6, purl 4, knit 6, purl 3, seed stitch panel. The next row is just like the original first row of the pattern, that is the cable repeat, in that we seed stitch for 12 stitches, purl 3, knit 6, purl 4, knit 6, purl 3, and seed stitch for 8. However, it will feel different because the knit stitches were cabled last row, so they might not be as easy to knit over. You may need the assist of a finger. You can do it 1 stitch at a time, or you can wrap all 6 as I just did. See what I'm doing with my left hand? It helps you knit that tighter stitch over without pulling the wrap that's above it off with the tightness of the stitch. You don't have to do it. It's just a thing to do if it gives you trouble trying to knit off the previously cabled stitches. We're ready for our purl 4, and then there's another cable panel, so we'll face the same thing, that somewhat tighter area, and that will be true every time we come to this point in the pattern. Here, because I'm going around the corner, I just go ahead and knit these 2 and then wrap around the corner. This time I'll do it 2 stitches at a time just for variety. As long as you get them knitted and the stitches are pretty even, it doesn't really matter how you accomplish it. I'm just showing you options. Now we will finish out this row with purl 3 and 8 seed stitches. Remember, that's always purl 3 and 8 seed stitches at this end of the work. No mystery here. Here's some helpful information for organizing your thoughts. We established the design based on seed stitch on either end of the pattern and then the knits and purls. And we do that for 4 rows. The 4th row is where the first cable cross takes place. That's the one with 3 crosses per 6 knit stitch panel. So that's what I'm calling the first cable cross. On the 6th row of the established design, which is our arrangement of knits and purls with seed stitch at each end, the second kind of cable cross takes place. This row consists of 2 cable crosses, and from this point on we will be following this pattern until it's time to finish up with the cable. So it's a 4-row repeat. After the cable cross 2, which we're about to do, we will knit 1 plain row, calling that row 1 of the design. On row 2 of the design, we'll work cable cross 1. This is the one you've already seen, with 3 crosses per 6 panels, 6 stitch knit stitch panel. Row 3 is a plain row, just keeping the knits knits and the purls purls. And on row 4, we'll work cable cross 2, which I'm about to show you. I've begun row 4 already in the normal way, working my seed stitch panel, working my 3 purls. Now this time there are still 6 knit stitches, but we're going to divide them up into 2 groups of 3 for knitting purposes. 1, 2, 3. And remember, we crossed the right one over the left one last time and replaced it first. On this row, the left goes over the right. In other words, the left is replaced first. Now we'll do our next 3. For the first cross, I crossed stitches 2 and 3 out of the 6. Now we're going to cross stitches 4 and 5 out of the 6 in the same manner. Stitch 1 and 6 get a rest this time. Left one comes over and is replaced on the right peg. Right is replaced on the left peg. I think I twisted that. I'll straighten it out. There we go. Make sure nothing loosened up too much, and we continue on. Our 4 purl stitches are the same as always. 1, 2, 3, 4. Time for 3 knit stitches. 3 of 6 knit stitches actually. But we want to do our cable cross on stitches 2 and 3 before we proceed to 4 through 6. Again, if we're counting only the 6 stitches in this knit stitch panel, stitch 1 gets a rest, stitches 2 and 3 get lifted, 2 comes over and sits on pegs 3, 3 comes over and sits on 2, we tighten up. They do tend to stretch a little, and that's okay that you hear and feel your yarn sliding to accommodate the stretch. But you don't want a big sloppy piece of yarn there. Snug it up so it's smooth. Now, 3 more stitches. And this time stitches 3 and 4 will change places. Left over right, with 3 getting replaced on peg 4 before 4 gets replaced on peg 3. 3 to 4, 4 to 3, snug up, and proceed with our purl stitches. Then the rest of row 4 is the same as it always is, 3 purls and the seed stitch panel. So from now on you will be repeating rows 1 through 4 for quite a while. And I will get back together with you in a minute when I've done more of them so that you can see how your pattern should start to look. Here's the review. This is what we're doing from here on out. I'm about to complete row 4. I've done all my cable crosses. So next I'll do a plain row. Then I'll do a row with cable cross 1, plain row, and row 4 that we just did. We'll get to come around and have another turn. And that's what we'll do all the way up the blanket.